All right, so it's a pleasure to be here. And just as a warning, it's being recorded. So later on, we're going to do some exercises with some audience participation. And I do intend to post this on YouTube. So, all right. Okay, so this is a talk about essentially how to give a good talk. And to start, there's two ways I could start this talk. Let me do it the more creative, fun way. How many people here know what Little Miss Muffet is? How many can recite it? Okay. Does anyone want to recite it for me? Again, you're gonna have to be brave, but there's a method to this. There's a reason for this. Do you want to go ahead, try it?
Little Miss Muffet sat on her tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider that sat down a spider and scared Little Miss Muffet away.
Very good, very good. Thank you, thank you. Does anybody else have another nursery rhyme that they have committed to memory that they want to just say? Similar to Little Miss Muffet. There's a reason why I'm doing this again, so yeah, go for it.
Itsy bitsy spider went out the water spout. Down came the rain and washed the spider out.
Okay, now speak the rest of it. Don't sing it. There's a reason.
The sun and dried up all the rain. Itsy bitsy spider went up the spout again.
Very good, very good. Okay, now I'm going to ask for a third one, but I want to make it a little more interesting this time because I don't want to focus so much on the words, but there's something else that you might notice. So does anyone have a nursery rhyme in a language other than English that they'd like to share? I see some pointing in the back. Oh, this guy knows something. Yeah. It's okay if the answer is no, but it'll add a little bit more to the discussion if we can get something like that. Okay, that's fine. All right, so last chance. Anyone? Up? Last minute? Up? Yeah. Oh, I see. Is it? You're just fixing your hair.
Like it's not meaningful.
Doesn't matter. Just speak it so that we can all hear it. Great. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Now, I'm going to say the Little Miss Muffet nursery rhyme, and while I'm saying it, I want you maybe to think about the difference between the way I am saying it and perhaps how you might say it and how you may have heard it said before or by somebody else. Okay. Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet, eating her curds and whey. Along came a spider who sat down beside her and frightened Miss Muffet away. Okay, now tell me some of the things that you've noticed that's different from the way that I said it versus what you've heard. Again, this is about it's about listening. It's about really trying to understand the difference in speech. Okay, so does anyone want to comment on the differences? Sure.
It was very deliberate and well enunciated.
Deliberate and most importantly, well enunciated. Okay, so in particular, what did I pronounce?
You kind of placed some emphasis on the last word, at the end of each kind of passage.
Exactly, the last consonant of every word. Yeah.
It was probably the same. I feel like you have a pretty good reason. Well, what we said is kind of just plain and pretty quick.
Raw, right? Very raw. Okay. Anybody else want to comment? More than just the diction, more than just the enunciation, was there anything else? Yeah.
You said it slightly slower and you paused after each phrase.
Great, that's right. The pace as well. Okay, so that's my Little Miss Muffet example. And the reason I start with that is because I want to immediately draw your attention to how we say things. Okay. I want to draw your attention immediately to it's not just about the words that you use, it's about how you use them and how you pronounce them. Okay? So before I get to my background, it'll flow into my background. There's two questions I want to address first now that we've gone through this exercise. It's the same question. Why are you doing this? And why are you doing this? Okay, with reference to this talk. So why am I doing this? So my background is I have a technical background, so I have undergraduate in math, master's in stats, PhD in applied mathematics. I also have performance background as well. So when I was an undergraduate student, I performed in a bunch of Shakespeare plays in and around the Twin Cities area in Minnesota. I also took quite a few classes. Oh, somebody else from Minnesota?
I'm going to grad school there.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Yeah, it's a great school. Yeah, and a great theater community as well, if you're curious. Okay, so I took a lot of performance classes, and I basically, went all in theatrical performance as well. Something I highly recommend at least trying at some point if you get the opportunity. And then in addition to that, I have several teaching awards. I was a teaching assistant for 5 years, and I was an instructor here for 5 years as well. I won a teaching award as a grad student and as a postdoc as well. So that's why why are you giving this talk? It's because I actually do have the background, I think, which gives me a little bit more of I have a little bit more of the standard sort of educational background to give a talk like this and to kind of share with you the lessons I've learned over the years. Now, why are you giving this talk? Why are you in this room listening to me explain this to you? And the biggest reason that I think a lot of students and individuals, not just students but everybody, they say things like, well, if my work is good enough, it'll speak for itself. I cannot emphasize how sort of naive that is. In addition, don't underestimate the power of a good presentation. Even if you think the work is not that great, if you present it well, it can make a world of difference. And conversely, even if the work is great, if you don't present it well, then oftentimes it's not being taken seriously. Okay, so this is a very serious endeavor to undertake, and I think many of you in this room probably have a lot of good raw talent, but like mathematically inclined raw talent, you have to harness it, you have to practice, and you have to get some training with it. Okay, so that's why we're doing this. It's the same reason why I was really good in math at school, but that doesn't necessarily equate into doing well on your exams. You do have to embark in some training to really take your skills to the next level. Okay, so let's take a look at this YouTube example. So I used to teach what are called the PIC classes here, Programming Computing. So it's pretty much the way I taught it was C++. And this is lecture 5. It was on operator overloading. And I just want to play that a little bit for you so that you can see how I actually implement a lot of these practices when I give or at least talk about a somewhat technical topic. And pay very close attention to the different things that I do, not just the speech, but when the camera pans over and you see my physicality, maybe be aware and maybe think of several comments or things that you notice. Good afternoon. So today we're going to start off with reducing our fraction class so that we can make some critical assumptions about the denominator always being positive. And for example, one really nice assumption we'd love to be able to make in the interest of numerical stability is that the fraction is always in lowest terms or most reduced form. Okay? That way, if we want to test for whether or not two fractions are equal to each other, we just compare the numerators and the denominators. So without thinking too much about how to actually do this, you know the algorithm to simplify a fraction. You find the factor, you factor it out and you cancel out the common factors. Well, there's an algorithm for that. It's very well known, Euclidean algorithm. And we don't have... Okay, so that's good enough. Not my best work, okay, but good enough to explain the main points and also point out which parts worked and which parts didn't work. Okay, so now, did anybody have trouble understanding the words that I was using? Okay, I think I've pretty good diction. Okay, I know how to pronounce the words pretty well by now. Now, what's another thing that you noticed that was maybe a positive? Yeah.
Like, I guess the graphic you had on the screen didn't necessarily correspond with what you were talking. I mean, I did in a larger sense, but like it wasn't directly illustrating what you're talking about at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Might be kind of difficult to process both sheets of information.
Yeah, that's a negative, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So one more positive, and then we'll get to the negatives in a minute. Absolutely. No. We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. So did you have a positive?
Yeah, but I'm forgetting it now.
That's fine.
No. You tended to pause or clarify when it was an important key term. So it was almost like a vocal catch where if someone were taking notes, their ear would catch and know to write something down.
Exactly. Okay, great. We have our, good. Do we have our negative? Can we get another negative? Yeah.
I think that he didn't introduce the term operator overloading until you are motivated. So first you're motivating it, so until this moment you have never mentioned that you're doing operator overloading so that people don't get things mixed by you type. So that's something important.
Okay, so I don't know if I couldn't really hear you very well, but
yeah, I'm saying that the lecture is on operator overloading. Until this moment you didn't introduce the term operator overloading, so you're only motivating for it. So that's something.
Exactly. So I've sold this lecture as operator overloading, but I haven't gotten to it right away. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Very nice. Very good. Yeah.
In maybe like halfway through, you kind of started to do a list, and then you just said one thing.
Yes. Exactly. And what do you think that indicates?
That later on you'll get to the other, hopefully 2 or more things.
Exactly. So, right. It shows a lack of organization. Okay, it shows a lack of preparation. That's why I like this example, because it's not like, here's a perfect example of me doing everything right. It's an example of, hey, you know what? You show up someday to a lecture and you do the best you can. Some days you're more organized than others. And from the days that you are organized, you say, okay, great, that was well executed. On the days you're not, you have to look very critically at what you've done and how you can improve again in the future. And that's really the hardest thing to do. And that's one of the things I learned when I was doing camera work. And I took some classes on like commercial acting and camera work. And one of the hardest things to do is to actually like do a scene, have it filmed, and then watch yourself mess up. Watch yourself do things that you cringe at, that you think are not very good or could be better. Okay, and so I think this is a very important exercise that if you have time or you have the, if you really want to get really good at these things, I think that's a really good exercise to engage in. To video record yourself trying to give the lecture that you want to give, and then critique yourself. Ask others for critique as well, but that's really important in my mind, is you have to really throw yourself out there and then get critiqued on it. Okay? So let's see. Excuse me. Okay, so here are some of the more mechanical parts of giving a presentation. These apply not just to giving a talk in front of a classroom, but also in terms of theatrical performance. And it's pretty ubiquitous in pretty much any type of performance, which is you have to speak to be heard, in particular to the back row. Doesn't matter what it is you're talking about, you have to be heard in the back row. Now, is anyone in the back row having trouble hearing me? Okay, so this is not by accident. Okay, this is a deliberate choice that I'm making. Okay? Project. That's called project. Projecting is where you project your voice to the back of the room. Enunciate, and that's the pronouncing of every consonant at the end of every word. Okay. If you have trouble with this at first, what you can do is overdo it first. Okay, so like I just did in that example, I overdid every last syllable, and then eventually you can bring yourself back. Okay, and at some point it will sound natural. But if you, right, our natural inclination, I think, is to not go far enough. And so my suggestion is go too far and then pull yourself back and go as far as you can without really straining yourself. Pause. I cannot emphasize this enough. You don't have to always be speaking. You don't have to always be moving. You can start a train of thought, and then you can take a moment and finish it a moment later. Now, this obviously takes practice. This obviously takes work. And when you're giving your presentations, it's going to be a little bit different because you will be extremely well rehearsed. So it won't be as extemporaneous as, say, the classroom YouTube videos, or this is somewhat extemporaneous as well. I've given similar talks like this in 2 years previous and last year, but for the most part, I'm kind of gotta making it up as I go. Okay. So, also in the mechanical aspect, assume at least one audience member is blind, deaf, and has difficult time understanding spoken English. In particular, avoid colloquialisms. This is very important. Have I used any colloquialisms thus far? That's by design. That's by training. I used to use a lot of colloquialisms in everything that I did, and I don't anymore. Not in when I'm doing presentations. That's important because you will get to that point when you're practicing your presentations and you will say things which is like something like, I don't know, straight from the horse's mouth. You're not gonna use that one, okay? But that's an expression where, or a similar one where, again, you have to assume that there's somebody out there who has no idea what that means and is like writing down every word and thinking, horse's mouth, horse's mouth. Well, there's no horse in this, okay? All right, define horse's mouth, okay. All right. So that you can more or less take into account when you're preparing your slides. So again, make sure that everything that you say gets on a lecture slide somewhere. Let's see, blind means that everything that you say, everything that's on the lecture slide in front of you should be spoken out loud to some degree, and vice versa as well. In case somebody can't hear you, everything they need to know is contained on the slide. Okay, so then it's moving on to part 3, movement/physicality. This is what you have less control over in the sense that you're going to make your lecture slides. Content-wise, they're going to have everything that you intended to have on there, and they're not going to change. Now, what the hard part is getting the physicality right. And that just takes practice, practice, practice. So first, you should have good posture. Unlike me, I do not have good posture. I've been working at it, and I'm still not that good at it. Okay, but you should try. Definitely try. Projection. Remember I talked about projecting to the back of the room? That comes from the belly, from the abdomen. It's like when you're singing. When you sing, you don't sing from the throat. You just sing from the gut. Okay, it's the same thing. So you don't want to be straining your voice from the throat. It should feel like the air and the power is coming from the belly. Finally, when the final part of movement physicality is gesturing. And this is the most important thing when it comes to giving a technical talk, because you have a limited amount of time, a limited amount of slides, and you have to make sure that you draw attention to the right part of the slide at that right time. And we're going to do some exercises with that in a little bit. Okay? There's one other thing that I don't know if you've noticed or not, that I do differently than most other individuals while giving a presentation. Can anyone think about, very critically about, what I might do that you might not instinctively? Wait, say it again? Is it a text file? Oh, yeah, no, I mean voice-wise. Yeah. Text file. This is just my quick and dirty way of being like, all right, how do I give a talk and how to give talks? And I just kind of went from there. Yeah.
Wearing a mic.
I am wearing a mic. What does that got to do with it?
Well, that will make your voice louder, kind of.
Will it carry my voice to the back of the room?
It might be.
It might, yeah. Should I still project?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. On the topic of projection, what is it that I might possibly do differently than many of the people in this room naturally?
You have a screen there, you're not looking at the screen, you're looking in front and talking all the time.
True, I'm thinking physicality. Physically. Yes, you all, very good things, very good things. I'm trying to have you read my mind, okay. Physically, what am I doing?
I mean, you're gesturing a lot, but I don't think that's it either.
That's not it either, but that's good. No, that's a good observation. Yeah.
You're not moving that much.
I'm not moving that much, but do I still have your attention?
Yes.
Why?
Are you looking at the audience?
Yeah,
I'm also using a lot of eye contact. That's true. Very good. No, you guys, see, this is why I don't want to just tell you the answer, because we're getting a lot of good stuff.
You're kind of moving your mouth a lot when you speak. You're making like very dramatic, like right there. You were definitely making very dramatic motions with your mouth.
Very observant. Yeah, very good. Very good. This is the hardest thing. This is the hardest attribute, okay? But once I point it out, anyone have another guess?
You're stopping and asking us to do.
I am stopping and asking you questions, which is not something you'll do in your presentations.
You're smiling.
I'm also smiling. Well, I'm a very pleasant person, so what kind of, I can't help that. Yeah,
Well, your hands are in your pockets most of the time.
that's bad actually. Yeah.
I was gonna say that it makes me notice more when you gesture with your hands, but.
Fair enough. Yeah, do you have a...
Is that really close to the audience instead of the projector?
I do try and make an effort to engage with the audience. I'm a little bit closer to you guys than I am to the projector. I do try and come at you. That's like a personality thing. I'm trying to come at you and grab your attention. Yeah.
Is it your pacing?
What about my pacing? Like this pacing or the vocal?
Oh, so one of these things is right?
No. Neither. Neither is what I'm getting at. Relating to projection, it's the... Yeah, what specifically about the vocal? It's not that.
But you do emphasize your words.
How do I get that emphasis?
Well, how do you get the? I don't think it's really volume. It's more inflection. Like
Okay.
when you said, "How do I get that emphasis?" You emphasize the question.
How? How do I get that emphasis?
You choose your words, just like you said, you versus you.
Mm-hmm.
You're very.
What's the difference between you versus why are you giving this talk?
Because you make us think about what angle you're approaching the question from.
And how do I get that distinction between the why are you giving this talk versus why are you giving this talk? What gives me that difference?
You're
The length of
emphasizing a different word in the sentence.
And how do you emphasize?
Length.
Volume.
You're changing the pitch of the words you say.
It's not just the pitch,
It's the length
the length.
and the volume. But
We have to pause before and after.
Pause before and after.
You kind of,
The volume is part of it.
you stay on the consonant in
The vowel.
Yeah, but how am I physically able to get that effect?
Are we talking about projecting from your abdomen?
Yeah, what is that? Why am I able to project from my abdomen?
Because your posture is good?
No. Good one, good one. There's one word. Because of what?
Shakespeare.
Okay, what is the one?
Background.
Okay, acting background. Now, what is it? This is good. This is good. I'm glad no one's gotten it just yet. What is it about Shakespeare that's different than a lot of other?
Iambic pentameter.
Iambic pentameter. Okay, what is the idea behind the iambic pentameter?
It's got a rhythm. Some things are stressed.
It's got a rhythm. Some things are stressed, right? Da-dum, 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 da-dum. And then what?
Punchline.
Da-dum, 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 da-dum. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. What am I doing? Breathing, taking a deep breath. You cannot articulate, you cannot pronounce every consonant of every word without taking a deep breath. Okay? So that's kind of the secret. When you're struggling to make that distinction, when you're struggling to ask yourself, why is this not coming out the way I want it to come out? Typically it's because you are not giving enough breath to the words that you want to emphasize. Why is it? So let's think about iambic pentameter for a moment. Does anyone have a favorite verse from iambic pentameter?
To be or not to be.
Okay, to be or not to be, that is the question. How many syllables is that?
That sounds like 11.
That's 11. Is that iambic pentameter? Actually, it is. So what happens is Shakespeare chose to follow iambic pentameter, and he also chose to break it. And whenever he breaks it, that's how you know that something's amiss. Okay, so the most famous line in Shakespeare, you probably never thought about it, it actually has 11 syllables. And it's the Elizabethan audience would have actually picked up on the fact that it's not a perfect 10-syllable line. More importantly, though, is you have to, you could say to be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind's eye to, wait, no, is that right? To be or not to be, that is the question, whether 'tis...
Is it nobler to bear the slings and arrows of misfortune?
Or something like that. Let's do another one. Let's see. I read one recently. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York, and all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. See how I just kind of rolled with it? Okay, now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York. And all the clouds, so I left off at the 7th syllable and I took a breath. That was wrong. Okay, let's try this again. Now is the winter of our discontent made glorious summer by this sun of York. And all the clouds that lowered upon our house in the deep bosom of the ocean buried. Now, do you see how I was able to pronounce every single word? It's because I didn't go for my full breath, right? I was doing that and I could actually have said a little bit more, right? So the point is that if you give every 10 syllables or so the proper breath, you can pronounce every single word the way you want to pronounce it. If you cheat, if you try and go 2 lines, you run out of breath real fast. Okay? If you don't really give each line a full breath, you're cheating the dialogue, the language. That same lesson applies to when you're giving, I think, technical talks as well. You don't want to spend your entire breath on a sentence or an idea that runs on and on and on and on because you run out of breath, and at the end of the day, I'm working really hard to try and stretch this breath, but eventually I have to relinquish. And so this is the key with Shakespeare. This is why Shakespeare is kind of an interesting thing to perform. It's because he's given you the locations where you can take a breath. And you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. But I can tell you, if you try very hard to pronounce every single word you want to say and give each word the proper breath, eventually it will come naturally, and then you won't have to overdo it like I did just now. Okay? So those are the main lessons, which is the biggest one is breath. Biggest one is breath. Okay, so should I do an example? Yeah. Let's do an example with a lecture slide that I used. Here we go. How many people know what C++ is? Okay, good. I'm in good company. All right, here we go. All right, so I taught a class called PIC 10A, which is Introduction to Programming. Taught it all last year, all 3 quarters. And at one point, I introduced the concept of a while loop. And this is one of the slides. Now, is there a lot on this slide? Yeah. The former director, Mike Rao, would have probably cringed looking at this slide. But this is going to help illustrate the point that I'd like to make, which is that when you have the right gesture, when all the pieces sort of come into place, you can actually present a slide like this with a lot of different pieces in a way that makes sense. So, shall we do it? All right, let's do it. Okay, so the most basic loop is called a while loop. Okay? It looks like the following. So we have double x equals some number like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we say something like while x is greater than or equal to 10, see out x is currently, you print out x, and then you replace x with its square root. And what this does, and then finally we see out the final value of x is, we print it out. Now, what this does is this following procedure. This stores x, first of all, as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then what we do, the first thing we do actually is we test to see if x is greater than or equal to 10. If that is true, then we go into the loop. So if true, it will run the lines of code inside the curly brackets. I left off the word curly, but definitely curly brackets is unambiguous. And when it comes to the end of the curly bracket here, it then rechecks the condition for whether or not x is greater than or equal to 10. And presumably x has changed value in the meantime, otherwise it might go for a while. Okay. So when we get to that final condition, if it's true, it will run the lines of code inside the brackets. When it comes to the end, it checks the condition again. And this ... here means continue this repetition until x bigger than or equal to 10 is false, at which point the loop ends and the remaining code gets executed, starting with see out the final value of x is, and then it prints out x. Okay, now, did that make sense? Could you follow it? Were you exceptionally bored? Maybe a little bored, but were you exceptionally bored? Okay. Did I implement most of the things that I said? Okay. How could I have done better? Yeah.
I was wondering, like, if we need that many, like, lot of tests in the slide.
The answer is no. You shouldn't have this much text for your presentations. This is a lecture slide that I wrote pretty much on the fly, being like, oh my god, I got a lecture in an hour, you know? Okay, so trying to optimize clarity of explaining the concepts as opposed to what you guys are going to do, which is you're going to spend a lot of time on like 30 or so slides. Yeah.
And I was wondering if we should read the slides in, like, instead of saying to the audience of like what basically the slide means.
There's a balance. There's a balance, right? Now, if you couldn't see anything, did I say pretty much everything that was on that slide? If you couldn't hear me speak, if you couldn't hear me speak, pretty much everything I said verbally was contained on the slide. Did I speak to the slide? No, I spoke to you guys. Now, I'm constrained by the content that's on the slide. But I tried to do a little bit of extra, but not too much, because if I do too much, then again, somebody might miss a crucial ingredient of what I'm talking about. The stuff that I said outside of the context of the slide was more aside comments, little extra things, but it wasn't crucial to understanding the main idea of what was contained in the slide. Yeah.
Echoing off that question.
Absolutely.
I know that you mentioned that, like, as you did again, like everything you say should be on your slide, and vice versa, like everything on the slide should be like verbally said in some way. But I've also heard that like some people recommend that like on your slides it should be more of an outline, and you elaborate the points on your slide verbally in more detail. And so, how do you really go about achieving a compromise between those two like extremes, where you have like very little on your slide, you elaborate a lot verbally, versus you have everything that you want to say on your slide.
Right. So there's a balance between having everything verbatim that you say also on the slide versus an outline that you elaborate on. Again, the guiding principle is the following. Imagine somebody really can't understand what you're saying. For whatever reason, they listen to your voice and it's an anathema and they have to turn it off. Okay? Or they can't hear you for whatever reason. Can they still acquire enough knowledge based on just what's on the slide visually to not get lost in later versions? For this while loop, you kind of need the full detail, otherwise you're not going to understand. But you're right, for other topics, you're not going to necessarily get into the details of like, oh, we used the QR method of blah blah blah, or we had to modify the QR algorithm to do such and such. Okay, modified QR algorithm is your bullet point, and maybe you say how you modified it verbally. And as long as that modification is not crucial to understanding the next part, then I think you're good. But yeah, there is definitely an interplay between what you say and what people see. Very good, yeah.
So in this example, you had everything on one page, and it makes sense because you're in one loop. But do you think it's also a good idea that if you can display it on something on 2 slides, and that still makes sense, to enlarge the loop on one slide and then later explain it in more detail?
Yeah, I think. Check this out. Talking about multi-level slides. Okay, so you can do a lot of different things on your slide. So this is an example of what I would call an animation via PowerPoint. It's really one of those things where if I had the debugger in front of me, I would just step through the debugger one step at a time. It really depends because you got to keep in mind that I always kept this in mind when I taught, which is that students may zone out for like 10 seconds. And so you got to be kind of careful. If somebody zones out for 10 seconds, how lost are they going to be? But yeah, you can do that. So for example, this is the extreme where I'm like showing how a for loop works. And I say, okay, well, let's start at the beginning. So we say, here's a for loop. It starts by setting I equal to 1. Then it does the first initialization. Then it checks the condition. If it's true, it executes the loop. See out I. Prints out the current value of I. We reach the end of the body. And when we reach the end of the loop, we then check the update function, or we call the update function, and then we check the test condition again. If that's true, we go into the body of the loop, we print out I, go to the end, we do the same thing, call the update function, and then check the test condition to see if it's still true, which it is, and we do this a few more times, now you get the idea. Finally, we have I is 5. Check the condition, exit out the loop, and of course, occasionally you can do see this? What is this?
A meme.
A meme in the sense that it's a colloquial expression. Okay? Now, the only time I usually use colloquial expressions are in the title. Step by step. Does anyone know what that's a reference to? What's that? Yeah, but there was a TV show called, I think, Step by Step, or the theme song said Step by Step, Day by Day by Day, right? Everyone, no? I forget the name of that one. But anyway, that's a bad reference. But this one is definitely a colloquialism, right? Now, do you have to have any idea what this is to understand it? No. Okay. But for your presentations, are you going to put that in there? No way. I don't recommend it. Okay? Because in the off chance that there's one, I do it because I get bored, and I get in a lecture. I've got like 30 of these lecture slides, so I throw it in there, even though I know I shouldn't. And then occasionally a student will ask me like, "What did you mean by keep calm and carry on?" I didn't understand. I'll be like, yeah, you're right. I shouldn't have put that in there. Okay? So the only reason I put that in there is because I knew it was wrong, and I just wanted to do it just for fun. Okay? So And I knew that I was doing something wrong, okay? It's kind of like when you abuse notation in mathematics. You're like, all right, I know I'm doing something I'm not supposed to, but I'm going to just do it. So does that kind of make sense? You can separate the material onto multiple slides, but the transition from one to the next has to be, I mean, has to be very carefully orchestrated. I do a lot of multiple slides where I do reveals, like I have one, and then I reveal a little more, reveal more and more. That is a way to help temper the sheer enormity of the material. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Anything I could have done? Oh yeah.
Actually, yeah. Answering that question.
Yeah. What could I have done better? Yeah.
So you knew coming here that you would have slides and you would have a blackboard.
Yes.
But you didn't make use of a blackboard at all when you could have.
Correct.
Not necessarily done it well. I mean, you probably would have done it well, but not everyone uses it well. But it's definitely a tool that can be used.
So definitely the chalkboard is a tool that can be used. The reason that I personally don't use it is because whenever I use it, I used to have students say to me, oh, I missed what you wrote on the board during lecture or something.
I mean,
and I shied away from using it. I will use it on occasion.
that's like a separate can of worms, right? Then you have to like write big enough. You have to make sure you're like prepared to like organize it properly. But if you come in with that in mind, that you're going to use the chalkboard for something, then you might be able to use it well.
Would you like me to use the chalkboard to demonstrate?
So yeah, for
Okay.
example, like if you went back to that really long slide,
Let's do it.
you could have like, I think it was like,
Oh, no, that's not it. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
yeah.
Quite a few more. Stay for a while. Yeah.
Right, you could have like written up the code there, or like put in a value and step through it.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Or something.
Let's do it. I'll do it over here because I have more room. Okay. Should I do it? Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so I have my while loop. Double x equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then a while x bigger than or equal to 10. Tell you what, let me write it on the board, and we'll step through this process one line at a time to sort of show you how the machine instructions get executed one by one. So we start with double x equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so we start with double x equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and when I usually hand write stuff out, I like to keep a little table here. So I have x, and I'm going to just put the value. So right now it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
So probably at this point we should just change the x to like 10 to the 6 or something, so that it's easier to.
Yeah, let's do that. So no, very, very good, very good. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And again, when somebody makes a suggestion, when somebody actively engages you while you're presenting, the answer is always thank you. Thank you for, engaging me, the speaker. Thank you for paying attention. Thank you for that type of input. Because if I don't listen, I'm going to lose an audience member. If I listen, I probably gain an audience member and potentially more others who say to themselves, all right, this guy's not completely full of himself. Okay? And that's really the goal. The goal is you want to have a sense of confidence, and you want to have a sense of, good presentation style, but the most important thing is to also listen. So thank you. That is a very great suggestion. I really like it. And you're right. It's going to really make the numerical computations much, much easier. So let's see. 10 to the 6th. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we'll change this here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Great. Good. Everyone see what I did there? So on this slide here, I just picked some number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And for my example on the board, I'm going to change it to 1 million, which is a much easier number to take the square root of. Okay? And in fact,
How about 10,000?
let's do 10 to the 8th. Is that all right? 10 to the 8th, you can take the square root a couple more times, right? Because it's a power of 2. Okay? Great. Now, while x bigger than equal to 10. And now this is another good reason to write on the board, so thank you for that suggestion. A lot of students, when they take tests or exams, they will write the following. Now, this is not valid C++ code. You could actually, copy and paste this character into your, your editor, and it may even show up like this. But too many times I've seen this on exams written by students who just being careless. And it's just very important to not be so careless. So greater than equals 10, we're going to see out, and I'm just going to take a shortcut, x and L, and then x equals sqrt x. We have our opening curly bracket here. We're going to end our curly bracket there. And then at the final, I'm just going to see out x. And then we're good. OK, now let's walk through step by step. X is 10 to the 8th. It's certainly bigger than or equal to 10. Let's put our output thing here. Right? OK. So first thing we do is print out x, which is 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's here. So x is 10 to the 8th is larger than or equal to 10. We see out x. X is now equal to the square root of x. What's the square root of 10 to the 8th? 10 to the 4th. That's kind of nice, isn't it? Yeah. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Go to the end here. We call there's no update. OK, we go here. We check the condition again. Is 10 to the 4th bigger than or equal to 10? Certainly is. So we print it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we take the square root. 100. I think we can all do that one. We keep going again. X bigger than or equal to 10, which it is. So we have 100. Then we take the square root again. The square root of 100 is 10. Now this is the tricky part. Okay. Is 10 greater than or equal to 10? Yes. Yes. OK, good. Print out 10. Now what's the square root of 10?
Square root of 10.
Yeah. 3 point something. But it doesn't matter what that is, right? Because 3 point something is certainly not bigger than or equal to 10. Does that make sense? OK. Were you not extremely bored? OK. So at least, you stomach that. You at least mostly paid attention, right? OK, good. That was fun. Keep me on my toes. Thank you. Any other comments or questions before I'm going to first turn it over to Q&A, just general Q&A, and then we're going to do exercise. One of you is going to come up here, maybe more than one of you, but only one at a time. It's going to come up here and try to do what I've just done, and we're going to critique you and try to get you to bring out your inner deep breathing self. So, are there any questions? Yeah.
So you did a problem on the board.
Yeah.
But if you do anything like separate from PowerPoint, do you still think it's really important to have the same content on the PowerPoint? So like if you knew you were going to do that board example, would you have still had it written out the same way on the PowerPoint?
If I knew I was going to do the board example. So again, my philosophy is everything that's written should be, well, I guess that's technically written. My feeling is that if you have a really well put together presentation, you shouldn't need to have to write on the board. I see the board as a means of extending an example or clarifying. For example, we use a modified QR algorithm to do blah, blah, blah. Maybe on the board, you actually explain what the modified QR algorithm is. As long as that's not essential to what you've done, as long as that's just a side note, a footnote to what's really going on. Because again, at the end of the day, you just gotta. I'm coming at this also from the perspective of someone's going to come and take a look at your work later, and you want everything in those lecture slides to be self-contained. Because if it's not and you lose them, they might just move on to something else. So again, I see the board more as an extension of, you'd prefer to say it verbally, but you can't, I can't do that verbally, right? I had to have written that out. But it should be seen as an extension of what you've already written rather than an integral. That's my opinion, personally. Yeah. You may not have to share that, but I've learned from experience that as soon as your talk is over, nobody's going to care about it. But somebody might want to use your technique or your method or know what it is, in which case you just say, yeah, I'll send you an email with my slides. Or I'll post my slides online. I'll post my slides on my website. And then you want to make sure that some random person who's looking at your lecture slides online has everything they need and the whole context they need to understand what you're trying to convey. Because if it's not, if you're missing something, they're not going to blame themselves and say, oh, I wish I was smarter. They're going to say, wow, this person does not so great work. So that's what you're always trying to kind of combat. You're trying to combat the skeptic, the person, the very well-thinking student who's like, aha, there's this thing that doesn't make sense. There's that thing that didn't, you could have done this better. I don't understand this. If you can assuage all of that type of criticism in a self-contained set of slides, that's ideal. Any other questions? Yeah?
What's sort of what you say about having everything accessible both visually and audially, or yeah, whatever that word is. Typically, when I'm giving a talk and I have some sort of graph or visualization that's not just text or math.
Yeah.
Typically, I have that on the slide, and then I explain in words everything that's going on, like what the axes are and what you're supposed to learn from this plot. But I typically don't have that information on the slide. I typically just have the graph itself.
Yeah, that's fine. Let me see if I have an example of that. Like this, right? Well, not exactly like that. Something like this, right? Okay, is there more to your question, or is that how do you do this?
Well, so, like a lot of the time, sometimes I'll have a slide that's just whatever my plot is. And I mean, the axes are labeled and stuff, but then I explain in words, sort of break down what the plot is, and that information isn't on the slide. Whereas here, you kind of do explain this on the slide, I feel like.
Yeah, so this is actually a bad, this is not that, okay, it's not a bad slide. It's not the best slide, okay? So this is a, tell you what, let me try to explain this slide, okay? And we'll see how terrible it actually is, okay? So, okay, so numerical area under the curve. So this is a plot of some function, let's call it f of x. And so you'll notice that I have my function here, f of x. And what we're going to do is we're going to be interested in a particular region in terms of x. So from x is -1 to 1.23 until x is 3.77. So we're only interested in x values between these two numbers. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to form what's called a bounding box around the function. And so I just need any box that has a width of this and a height that's at least as large as the maximum point of the function evaluated inside this region. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just throw down random points inside this box, and I'm going to count the number that lie underneath the curve f of x. And that's going to give me a good estimate for the area under the curve by taking the quotient for the number of dots underneath the curve relative to the total number of dots. Does that make sense? Now, this is a very deceptive example because there's no units. There's no actual function that I'm integrating against with meaning. I really just have this idea of Monte Carlo simulation where I'm saying, oh, hey, look, here, the simplest thing you could do. But did I cover everything that's written here? Did I read it off verbatim? No. But I didn't need to, right? Because I understood the topic so well that in the process of trying to articulate it, I pretty much had to cover all of those. And you'll find that when you give your own talks. You'll have a slide, you'll have a diagram, and you'll be explaining it 50 times before you give your presentations. At some point, it'll just be like, you'll know it so well you could do it extemporaneously. Yeah.
Okay, but just to clarify Monty's question, you still have text under your graphic.
I do.
So would you say that you would always explain at least part of the graphic on the slide and not just have the graphic there?
My opinion is, if you've taken the time to write it on the slide, you got to give it some lip service. You got to at least acknowledge it in some way or form verbally. The only thing I didn't really cover was why ymax is equal to 7.4. I mentioned the idea of a bounding box, but I didn't say why 7.4 was. I didn't even mention 7.4 by name. And that's something that if I could do it over again, I would do it differently. Okay? So in that sense, you can have as much or as little text as you want. But if you took the time to write down this text, it had better be important. And if it's that important, you'd better do what?
Say it.
Say it verbally. Okay, so it's really about thinking about what's necessary to convey the point, and also to be as sort of minimalistic as possible. You don't want to put too much stuff. There's like this expression in Einstein, attributed to Einstein, right? Everything should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. So you want to have just enough to kind of convey the point, but you don't want to necessarily go too far overboard. Yeah.
I don't know if we should spend much time on this, but I feel like when I was understanding your explanation, I didn't read the text. And if I were reading that text sometimes, like also for some other professor's lecture, if I were reading the text on the slides, I might not follow the words. So like I was wondering if this test is serving as a lecture note, something like that, or if it really helps the audience to understand this graph well.
You should think of the lecture notes as a roadmap. Okay? So it's hard because you're right, there's a trade-off between focusing verbally and what you're hearing and focusing on what you're seeing. And there's only so much you can control. Some audience members, I mean, you all know this, right? You're all different. Some of you will look and you'll be gravitated towards reading, and my voice will just fizzle away. Others may be the opposite. You might actually, connect with the voice, with the words that I'm using. You might identify your knowledge with that, and you might completely forget what you've seen in front of you. Okay? So all I try to do is make sure all my bases are covered. I make sure that whatever I say verbally and whatever's written on the page conveys the same type of information. It doesn't have to be the same, but it should be equivalent. Yeah. Does that make sense, or does that not answer does that answer? Okay. Yeah. Question.
I think also if you're teaching or if you don't know the audience well, you'll have to transcribe somehow all the images because like someone is visually impaired or have some problem with seeing. Actually, I had a case where I know someone who like all the lecture notes were like probably most of them are images. Even the text is like screenshotted images. And we had actually a student who was visually impaired in class, so that was really a problem for them. So if you're teaching or like if you don't know well the audience, I think you must have to include some text to make it accessible or even if you want it offline.
Yeah.
Sorry, online on your website or something, you probably need to consider this point.
Yeah, absolutely. So so let's take that feedback. This is great feedback. So the first thing I probably should have done is say the following. What you have here is this plot of a function with some smooth curve, and it's contained within a box, and there's a collection of points which are scattered about the box. Some lie above the curve, some lie below the curve, etc. ... Then go back into my description. So you're absolutely right. Yeah, so that's an example of where I didn't fully think through about okay, what if somebody can't even see the plot here? So yeah, I agree completely. Introduce the plot that you're saying with like, okay, here's a plot of user data versus the queries of blah, blah, blah. It looks sort of like, as you see, it looks sort of like a sinusoidal shape with a little kink right there in the middle at around x = 1. and then you can go, all right? And so you're right, yeah, absolutely, yep. Anything else before it becomes your turn? Let me just end on this note. Okay, the most important thing to realize is you're not perfect. You're not going to get it right the first time. Yes, you may have raw talent, but raw talent needs discipline. Okay, so even if you think you're pretty good at this stuff, even if you think, oh, I'll just wing it, or oh, I'll let my raw talent show through, you can do that. But I think everyone in this room, myself included, benefits from practice, 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 self-reflection in the form of getting critiqued, and then listening when somebody critiques you. Take it as an opportunity to grow, take it as an opportunity to communicate that much more effectively. Okay, and if you sort of approach it with that perspective, with that mentality, I think you'll, at the very least, you'll at least gain an interesting perspective on how you are perceived and how you are being perceived by your audience. Okay, great. Who wants to go? Yeah, come on up. Your name is Monty?
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of Monte Carlo, huh? Right? Now, which slide would you like to do?
I don't know. Should it be one I've seen before?
Well, yeah, let's do one you've seen before. Either this one or the while loop.
Okay. I'll do this one, I guess.
Great, perfect. Now just pretend he's me, okay?
All right, so now I'm going to talk about how we can use Monte Carlo integration to compute the area under a curve. So here I have a plot which contains a few things. First, it contains a graph of some smooth function here. And then this graph, we've now placed it inside a box which contains the entire region of the function that we've drawn. And inside this box, we've placed some randomly distributed points, which you can see here. So the box goes from, we've chosen a left endpoint, -1.23, and we've chosen a right endpoint, 3.77. And those are the left and right boundaries of the box. And the box also, vertically, it goes from the minimum value of the function to the maximum value of the function. Or actually, it's some point which is above the maximum value of the function. So in this case, we've chosen a maximum value for the height of the box of 7.4. And to use this to compute the area under the curve, the idea is that for each of these randomly generated points, we will check if it's above or below the curve defined by this function. And if it's below this curve, we will add it to some total. We'll keep track of the total number of points which are below the curve. And then we will take the number of those points and divide it by the total number of the points and multiply it by the area of the box. And that should give us a good approximation for the area under the curve, as long as the number of points we took was high enough. Woo.
Good. Okay, now let him have it. All right. Okay, first, what did he do good? What are the things you liked about his presentation? You can go if you...
Let him have it.
Huh? What's that?
You said let him have it, so.
Sorry, no, I was, okay. Let's not let him have it just yet, okay?
I like how you clearly explained every aspect of the graph, talking about the left and right and the minimum and maximum and what the points represent. You were also really good at sort of looking, always looking at the other things, not sort of turning around to do the graph.
I thought you spoke very clearly.
Yeah, not just the graph, but kind of the slide which into like the different things on there. It was like kind of summarized accurately.
I like how you started with the figure, because kind of that's the first thing we're drawn to, is you kind of explained everything we're seeing visually before you actually went into the explanation.
All right, now let's let him have it. Yeah, go ahead.
So just towards the end, when you're getting to the actual point, if I were a student who really understood what you're talking about, it would have been great because you were concise and just more comfortable. If I was a student who was having any trouble following you, without pauses, it just would have been too fast. So the content was on point, but I just didn't have processing time if I didn't already know what you were saying.
and how many else on the topic of that? How many else noticed that the pace noticed the pace of the presentation? Okay, so this is the important thing to realize is that when it's good, it's noticeably good. And when it's not great, it's noticeably not so either. Okay, so yeah, it wasn't just one person, it was noticed throughout. Okay, great. Anything else?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, I thought for explaining the graph, like, especially in the interest of time, like some sort of explanation is good. But if you spend too much time on explaining the graph without like showing the main idea of this slides, it might be skeptical, because I feel like you spend half of the time explaining the graph and use another half of the time explaining like how Monte Carlo method works, while the other half is like much harder to understand than the first half.
Yeah.
If a word ended in T, there was no T.
Need more facial expression.
Wow.
Yeah.
I just, on that note, I think more facial expression would come with pauses, just because it felt like it was one breath. And so it wasn't, and not even like, you could say facial expression, but more, when you're in one breath, you don't connect, you're just like, da-da-da-da, and you're making eye contact, but it's still like your brain is in math world. And no, but like if someone's watching a presentation and they're not a mathematician, I just see that loss. They're like, that's great content, but I didn't get any of it, you know, that would be my
Great. Yeah.
This definitely, I think it's probably about the breathing.
Yeah.
Also, because I kind of spaced out, sorry. I think when presentations go too quickly and you don't stop the way you're stopping, it's really hard to pay attention. So, but yeah, it was probably really good.
Yeah.
There was a sense, I mean, you haven't done this before, which is probably especially where this comes from, but there was a sense of inwardness of your presentation, like more thought about what you were doing than like directing outward towards the audience.
I don't know that I understand what you just said.
I think I get what he's saying. Like, towards the end, especially when I was talking about how the way that you actually get the area is by, counting the total number of points under the curve, and then dividing that by the total number of points and multiplying it. It's kind of like I'm doing now, where I'm looking upwards and remembering how to do it in my brain.
Okay.
Doesn't have. It's a lot easier not to do that when it's on a topic that you're very familiar with and you've given slides about before. So it's something that you can just say rather than reminding yourself of what you're supposed to say as you're saying it.
Got it. Now, stay here.
Okay.
Anything else? Yeah.
Wait, this is kind of a really positive thing. Like I mentioned earlier, but like I think he did a really good job of working with everything that's provided on the slide, like not ignoring, glossing over any like when you talked about the diagram, you talked about every single aspect of the diagram, and that was a really good thing, and then gloss over any material provided to him in the slide.
Great. All right. Let's try and make it better. Okay? Now, you ready for this? All right. Okay, now, I'm just going to do one simple thing. Just one simple thing. You're going to do it again, okay? But every time I clap, you're going to take a deep breath. Okay?
Okay.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about the basic Monte Carlo method for computing the area under a given curve. So the first thing you should notice is we have this graph on this slide, which contains a few things that you should pay attention to. It contains the graph of a smooth function and also a box which completely contains the part of this function we've drawn. And within this box, we've drawn some randomly distributed points. And we've determined the location of the box so that we fit the entire function in. So in this case, we have chosen to have our left endpoint at minus 1.23 and our right endpoint at 3.77. And then we had to choose the top of the box so that the entire function fits inside. In this case, that means that we've chosen the maximum value of 7.4. And to actually compute the area of the function using this method, what we're going to do is we're going to count how many of these randomly drawn points are below the graph of the function. Once we have that number of points, we will take that and divide it by the total number of random points that we drew originally. Then the fraction of points that were under the curve should correspond to the fraction of the area inside the box that the curve makes up, that the area under the curve makes up. So to get the total area, what we need to do is we take that fraction of points under the curve to total points, and we multiply it by the total area of the box. And as long as we have enough sample points that we've put inside the box, that should give us a good approximation to the area under the curve.
What did you notice that was a little different?
Slow it down.
Ortiz of different words.
I feel like if you breathe, you also have time to reflect on what you just said as well, and kind of like recap, like remind yourself of where you are in the process, so it makes it also easier for you to explain it.
Yep.
I like that you repeated kind of from a couple different angles how you could make the computation. So you made it clear for the student or the person who would get it right away, the process, and then you broke it down again afterwards. As you're thinking, okay, wait, like what I understand is if I was just someone listening for the first time, it was so much clearer.
What is the only thing that I forced this poor guy to do? Breathe. Okay. Now, another thing let me point out before we forget, I started clapping pretty often at first, right? Now, did you notice a difference right away? I did. I noticed that just naturally, what did he start doing? Well, obviously breathing, but what else? What was the byproduct of that? Yeah, he was putting more breath into those words, right? Rather than trailing off, he was doing what? Yeah, he stopped, and then he started again, and he was enunciating, and then it kind of trailed off, right? Now, did you notice there was a beautiful moment, like beautiful about 10 or 15 seconds, where I did not clap? Did you notice how he just instinctively did the breathing correctly? Not correctly, but effectively. There's no correct or anything, but did you notice how he instinctively did it and it was still effective? And then what happened towards the end? He went back to his old way of doing it, okay? So that's all you need is to breathe, okay? All you need is to, in your mind, say, after a few syllables, stop, and then keep going, okay? So, do you want to do it again?
Should I do it again, guys?
Yes, yes, you should. Okay, now, okay, yeah. Okay, now, this is important. I'm not going to clap anymore.
Okay.
You have to manage your own breathing.
Okay.
Now, if you find yourself trailing off, as I know you're smart enough to realize when you are trailing off, just stop. Whatever it is, at any point in the sentence, just stop. And then keep going.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right.
All right, so now we're going to talk about Monte Carlo methods for computing the area under a given curve. So to represent this, I have a visualization of a function where we want to find the area under the curve given by this function. So the first thing we have plotted is the curve for our function, and then we've placed this curve inside what we call a bounding box. So we've chosen the left endpoint of the box. This is the left endpoint of the region of area we want to compute to be minus 1.23. We've chosen the right endpoint to be 3.77. And then we need to also choose how high to place the box vertically. So we want to contain all of the area under the function inside the box. So we need this vertical endpoint to be above the maximum value of the function. So in this case, we've chosen a maximum value of 7.4 for the height of the box. And then the other thing that's in this figure is the randomly distributed points that we're going to use to calculate the area under the curve. So the way that this method works is we're going to count how many of these points are underneath the graph of the function. And each time one of those points is under the graph of the function, we'll add it to a running total. So we'll keep track of the total number of those points. And as long as we have a lot of sample points, then the fraction of points which are under the curve should correspond to the fraction of area that the region under the curve takes up compared to the whole box. So to actually compute the area under the curve, what we'll do is we'll take the total number of points under the function, divide it by the total number of points we placed in the box at all, and then we'll multiply that by the area of the box, and that should give us our approximation to the area under the curve using the Monte Carlo technique.
Now, was that much more engaging and interesting to listen to? Yes. Okay. And what did he? The only one thing: awareness of breath. Okay. Now, the other stuff is important to be aware of: the pronouncing the consonants. But you see, that was a byproduct of taking a breath. And now, does it still need some work? Always. It always could be better. Okay? But the point is that you now have the tools that you need to, get the outcome that you want, and also be aware of, like, oh, okay, I want this type of outcome. Okay, maybe I need to breathe more. Maybe I need to pronounce this, articulate this, enunciate this. How do I get that? Through the breath. Okay? So, good job. Thank you. Who's next? Yeah, come on up. And do you want to do this slide or another one? Oh, they have to go? Okay. Who's they? Everybody? Oh, okay. Well then, so we can just go cut it out right now. Okay, great. So, perfect. All right, great. Well, thank you for your volunteering anyway. So anyway, that's. Do you guys have any other questions before I go? Good luck. If I can make projects day, I will. Otherwise, again, practice, and just breathe. Think deep breath and think pronouncing all of those consonants, all those words, and just get critiqued, make adjustments, and just have fun with it. Okay, thanks, guys.